Welcome to the January Donovan Show. It has been quite an epic post-election week. So today we're going to talk about what we have learned from the election, the lessons, what we can do better, and our role as women moving forward post-election. So before we get started, my name is January Donovan. I am the founder of the Women's School, where we train women all across 40 plus countries with the mindset and skill set necessary to design a life that makes them feel alive, where every part of your life feels whole, alive, free, so that we can order our life towards what's true, what's good, and what's beautiful, and use it to contribute value in the world. So much of our training is rooted in moral truth and objective reality, and just what it means to be an authentically feminine woman for such a time as this. So I honestly think that the Women's School was created for such a time as this, and that the last 4 years have been quite an adventure in what womanhood is, and women being undefined, and women not knowing their role all of a sudden after trying to insert themselves for almost more than 100 years. And so I think we are walking into a golden age of womanhood, and I'm very excited about it. As you can tell, maybe in my post, that I wholeheartedly believe there is a return to morality, or at least there is a hunger for it that would invite women, men and women all across America, but also the world, to say, you know what, we should actually take a look at this model of what we call whatever you want, whenever you want, whatever you feel like model. It may actually not work. So let's go back down. So let's go back to our goal for today, which is lessons that we learned from the election, because I think the most important thing that we can do is to now assume the role of woman in context of I would say, of this time in history, but also what we've learned from the last 4 years. And in some ways, the last 4 years, where there's been a lot of dark moments, free speech under attack, your faith was under attack. I actually had a friend of mine from college. It was her husband, where the FBI raided, I believe, her and 7 of our children, the hoax, for praying in front of an abortion clinic. I think that there has been a lot of manipulated information that's coming out to be false by the media. I think what we've seen the last 4 years is actually there is a very sinister agenda against America to lead us towards Marxism, socialism, and really break down the moral fiber of our culture, which is rooted in biblical principles. And so we have to kind of take an honest look at, wait a minute, how did we get here? How did America lose sight of being an American? How did America lose sight of the gift of being a free American man and woman? How did we come to a point where free speech and the definition of woman was under attack? And I always think of what Ronald Reagan said, is that, freedom is only about one generation away from fading. And I think that what we've learned from the last 4 years, I think, is a massive awareness that evil is so palpable and it's so real, and we can't pretend it doesn't exist. And we can't pretend that we are not to be in the culture, that we can't just hide under a rock. And what we need to do is to reflect on our role moving forward, so that we don't repeat the same history where, I really think I was honestly just so fearful for my children's lives, because I really didn't know if they were going to live in the same America and the same level of freedom. And I think that what we witnessed the last week has been mercy. And it doesn't even matter if you're Democrat and Republican. This is not a Democrat-Republican issue, because if you think about it, a lot of people that have followed Trump who are moving from the Democrat to now, the Republican, and I don't think it's necessary because all of a sudden they've become Republicans in all issues, but I really think they united themselves against sort of an agenda to break down America. I think that's what they signed up for. It's the realization that there is a sinister elite group of people that are globalists that have actually been trying to poison our children, our food, our country, our government, and our leaders. And the one thing that's clear to me is that we have a crisis of courage in our culture and a crisis of leadership, because for our leaders to be so corrupted, and not all, but there's a lot of them coming out. I think that Julian Assange said, if once everything's found out, 99% of Washington you will see is corrupt. And I'm, paraphrasing. And all this, when I first kind of thought about when COVID first hit, and Ryan and I were doing our research, and we thought, that's all conspiracy. That's all conspiracy. And if you kind of look back on it, you realize it's even worse than what we even thought were conspiracies, And I think that the best thing that happened to America was evil overplayed his hand like he always does, and they were found out. That they were no longer hiding, that they were just outright saying all the things, and people rejected it. Because I think at the end of the day, people still believe in truth. People still want truth. There's a small number of people who've, I really think have been so brainwashed that they don't see it and they don't choose not to see it. But I think the majority of American have common sense. And that's, I think, what won in this ticket. So regardless of which side of the aisle that you're in, my goal here is to actually find the unity so we can move forward. And we don't have to agree in everything, but we can agree to be honest, to be rooted in our character, to actually be respectful, and to hold a higher standard for America. So let me just go down a list of 10 things that I think are lessons, that are key lessons that we can learn and we can harvest. Now, in the women's school, we train women with a skill set and mindset necessary so that they are not living a life of overwhelm. Because here's what I think, that being overwhelmed hinders our capacity to actually be a voice of contribution in society. We're too tired, we're too exhausted to do our part, to maybe be part of our community, be part of our civic duty, use our gifts and talents to preserve what is true, good, and beautiful in our culture. And so it's important that we have the right skill set, because being overwhelmed causes the root cause of being overwhelmed for us in the school is being underskilled, and the lack of skills has really caused, I think, us to come to a point where we don't have a capacity to fight evil in the world, and so we just retreat because we don't have the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual energy. And I think what that has allowed us to see is that it can't work. It really can't work. So this goes into number one. Good women cannot stay silent. It's like that squeaky wheel quote. And women who often have this noble desire to take care of our family, maybe you have an honest living and do what is noble and right, and, create the extraordinary hard work in those ordinary days. They're not necessarily saying, you know what, I really want to be part of politics or Hollywood or, the health industry. They're just saying, I want to do what's noble and right. But what happens is that people that maybe doesn't have the best agenda are the one that's screaming. They're the one that's ruffling the feathers. They're the ones that's so vocal about what they think, that women should have abortion rights, that women should rip their babies out of their stomach, that women, men can be women, women can be men. I mean, they are so vocal. And when we're silent, good women who have a moral compass are silent, well, guess who wins? Those that are loud. It's common sense. So what I think that we can harvest from this is that good women have to share goodness of their life. They need to be vocal. They need to speak up in social media. They need to find time, develop a rhythm of life and a routine and a mindset that allows them to maybe part of their association, part of their library, part of, maybe your small local community. Because if you think about it, it was the mothers who resisted a lot of the pornographic books in our school system that opened our eyes to this just attack on our children's purity. It was also the people who were in the libraries who said, wait a minute, there are books in our libraries that our children should not be watching. So you have a role to play. When I say not be silent, I'm not saying screaming. I'm saying ask the questions. I'm saying have hard conversations. I'm saying if you see something that is in not harmony with what is good and what is true, then speak up. Because the best thing, and that evil grows when good women stay silent. And it's a quote, I think, from Cardinal Burke, that evil grows when people stay silent. And it's really true. And America has shown us that it's actually been, I would say, proven, and we can see that our silence has led us to the last 4 years, but it's also because of the evil that we have witnessed that we woke up and we didn't stay silent and we shifted this country. And I think we are walking to an opportunity of mercy. There's a call for us. God gave us a chance to not walk into Marxism and have our election actually be secure, because once that's gone, it is gone, and America is the last stop. So this is really not political for me in the women's school. It's spiritual. And sometimes women are like, Jane, why are you being political? I'm like, this is not political. When our right to practice our faith, when our right for a moral compass is stripped away from us, then we can't practice our spiritual life. And so we have to use our platforms to speak up against the evil. And that's really what I'm doing. And sometimes people don't like it, sometimes people do. I'm not in here to tell you exactly, this is Democrat, Republican. I'm here because I want to bring awareness to the gift and the privilege of being a woman. And unfortunately, that's under attack politically, spiritually, in Hollywood, everywhere. So we do have to have these hard conversations. But the point is that our silence enables that evil. So we need to speak up. And if you think about it, my courage and the courage of so many who, woke up in droves, came in droves to defend our beautiful America, was because a few good people spoke up in social media, even though they were silenced, even though they were suppressed. And then that led to more people speaking up and more people speaking up. And I think that became the ball of courage that we needed to actually defend our country. So we can't afford to not speak up. Good women can no longer stay silent. Number two, our faith was almost taken away for us. We ought to be authentic about our faith. Now, when I first started doing the women's school, because the women's school is what I call the bridge ministry, don't, talk about an exegesis. It's not, it's not a Bible study, but everything that I do is actually rooted in biblical principles. It's rooted in objective truth. And so it's not faith-based, but it's rooted in my faith and the things that I teach. I've been doing for 25 years, but I really wasn't vocal about it. I talk about God because all my followers know that my faith is the most important part of me, but it's not just something that I was extremely vocal about, because I wanted to be respectful of other people who didn't share the faith, because I do believe that this work is for everyone, not just for, people who are Christians or Catholic. I do believe that being a woman is rooted in objective truth, and it's not exclusive to one's faith. I think that's the way God designed it. However, I think my inability to profess my faith actually has also enabled people to be afraid of expressing their faith. More importantly, I think that we saw our faith being taken away from us slowly and slowly. In Scotland, you are now put to jail for praying in front of an abortion clinic, and the same thing we saw incidents in England. And I told you about the Hope family. We are seeing Betty was put to jail she's put in jail for 3 years. She has, I think, 2 or 3 young children for praying in front of an abortion clinic. I mean, this is where we are. So what we need to be clear about is that we can no longer have a separation of who we are in our faith. I think that this should give us a sense of a warning, and I'm really speaking to myself, that when we profess who we are to the world, it is not separate from our faith. Now, I don't have to be doing exegesis, I have to be doing a Bible study, I don't have to be, but it can never be apart from me, and that I should be free to share my faith because it's integrated in every part of my life. And actually, I see that with Charlie Kirk, I see that with Candace Owens, I see that actually with our leaders and influencers right now. They're no longer afraid to speak up their faith. And so that's what I'm encouraging you is, we don't have to shove faith down people's throat, but we can actually be open and vocal about our faith. And I don't agree with shoving down our faith to people's throat. I think that's the reason why we lose other people to Christianity, because some people have sold them kind of like a car salesperson. It's like, here's Jesus, but I'm kind of sleazy about it, like a car salesperson. We don't want to go back. And so we need to do it authentically, where our lives become the living invitation for faith. But we shouldn't shove it down our throat, but we should be vocal and honest and authentic about our faith. Number 3, the importance of patriotism. What we saw here was a global movement to strip away America's identity, to almost, that idea of kneeling when the national anthem, that whole NBA, Kaepernick movement, and Megan Rapinoe, I think that's her name, for soccer. I mean, it was just this kind of like celebrated lack of patriotism, burning of the flags, and it was sort of kind of norm. And then when you thought like something's wrong with that you shouldn't be doing that, all of a sudden you were bullied into being a, racist or misogynist, whatever all the different labels are, that American flags, we were seeing stories, if you put the American flag, you're being intolerant of other people. Like, well, I think it's time for us to reclaim what it means to be an American. I'm an immigrant. I came here with this sense of gratitude for America because I didn't see my parents for 5 years in order to get legal passage to America. That's how you did it, and you sacrificed for it. But that sacrifice yield a level of patriotism and gratitude for America that I am willing, to defend what America is. That's the kind of people that we need in America, the one that's not going to take American patriotism for granted. I think there's going to be a rise of the new patriotism. I think what we are seeing are, people from communist China and other communist countries that's saying, they're speaking up. They're like, no, 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 this is exactly what they did in our country. And yet so many people were asleep. This whole idea of mass psychosis, it is so real. They use it in Germany. They use it to abuse people. And, kind of like people are in a trance. They're not paying attention and they're just following the crowd. And that's what we did with that. We did with the vaccine, we did with 6 feet apart. And I was like thinking, I'm like, wow, there's 666 everywhere. That's the number of the devil. I'm like, why pick number 6, which is not even rooted in science? Everybody wore masks. And, I had to pull my children out of school because I couldn't have my 4-year-old wear a mask all day, and I couldn't fathom it. And so people that resisted, but that resistance was met with a lot of criticism, rejection, but they persevered. And I just think that we need to not take for granted what America is. We need to make English be part of our language, and that is, I speak 2 languages, but it should be the medium of instruction. We should celebrate our ability to speak English and also teach our children American history. There are some schools, from what we are learning, that are taking things out of history because it's offensive. We have got to stop being offended. We can't raise weak children and then those weak children grow up to become leaders because they're offended and triggered. We've got to get rid of this idea that we are so politically correct because we are so sensitive about people's emotion. We've got to be stronger than that. Emotional command, mental strength, and mental resilience for a time of moral decay is necessary. So yes, be triggered for 5 minutes, but then rise up and grow up and mature. Like, we can't do that anymore. We can't be this triggered culture where we're walking on eggshells because I might use the wrong pronouns or I might offend you. It's like, no, we're far stronger than that. We can't continue to be a victim of other people's emotional insecurity or emotional weakness, because if we do, we create monsters out of them, but also we create havoc in our society. Number 4, free speech needs to be guarded every single season, every single day of our life. Now, free speech is not violent speech, but a free speech that you are able to speak things that are of opposing opinion. You can ask questions about the vaccine. You can ask questions about the pharmaceutical company. You can ask questions about, why is the media actually, who's paying media? Why is the media so against Trump? We should not be silenced in our social media. When I talk about defining a woman, when we started promoting the women's school, we were doing ads, and a lot of it was, womanhood and the definition of woman, what it means to be a woman, and men and women, and we were just blocked and banned from Facebook. And, I'm like, this is so frustrating because you've got this behemoth of an organization that's silencing you for whenever they feel like, because they have standards, community standards that violate, and they don't even tell you why. They just yank your ads, they just yank anything, and they shadow ban you. And I think that those days hopefully will be behind us with for President Trump's coming into office. I pray for him, and I pray for his life, and I pray for his cabinet, I pray for all the things that he's picking right now. But I do think that I can see so clearly why they hate him. Like, I heard a quote today. I said, oh, he's not against, I said, they hate him because they think he's a threat to democracy, when in reality he's actually a threat to bureaucracy. I'm like, that is actually so spot on, as from Rubin Report. But we have to defend free speech as women, so we have to speak up, and they shadow ban us, and I think this is the time to do it. I think we've got the next 4 years to be louder about our ability to be patriots, for our faith, to what it means to be a woman, and to defend free speech. Now, we can't be rude. I don't think we should be condescending. I don't think we should be attacking people. We should hold space for different opinion, but not in a way that's condescending and rude, right? Because I do think that there is an attack both right and left sometimes when you talk about these things. Number 5, we need to hold a standard of character in our leadership position. I think we've lost that standard. We think, oh, well, he's good at what he does, but he cheats on his wife. You know what? He's good at that, but he was dishonest and he was caught stealing. I think that we need to do a better job attaching character with the roles of leadership, because if they can do one thing with bad, what makes you think that they're going to be honest in, politics? So there needs to be a higher accountability of integrity and honesty and character formation in all our leaders. So we shouldn't just be voting for their record. We should be voting for the record and also their character. People might argue about what, President Donald Trump, and he have all these, people like, well, he's been, like he raped women. He's been a felon. Thank you. He's a felon. No, and all that, even to think about it, how many felonies were tossed out as basically banana republic? What makes you think that all those trials that he's misogynist and he's a rapist? I mean, all these different things that to smear one's character. And you always think about the man's character. I'm sure no one is perfect. And David's not perfect. I'm not perfect. No one's perfect. But I look at his children and I think that his children are no addictions. They're so loyal to him. They have a good high moral standard. Never been caught in any kind of Hunter Biden legal story. Nothing. Like, that is a testimony of a man. Though imperfect, you can always see the man bites fruit. And so that's what I think is a really great way to think. We need to look at families. We need to look at, when we're appointing someone, what are their children, right? And what are they like as a father or a mother? What's their ethics look like? Number 6, I think what we're seeing also from, this election, is that there's a rise of strong masculine men. There's a great quote: strong men, weak men create weak societies. Strong men create strong societies. It's just a great quote. I should have got to put it out. I'm kind of butchering it. I'm sorry. But I really have kind of reflected on Patrick Bet-David, even Joe Rogan, even Charlie Kirk, all the men that are not kind of being bullied over by social media, and they're saying, you know what, I'm not buying it. And I think because of that, there's hunger for true, authentic masculinity. And I think what we are seeing is a pushback against a radical feminist agenda, who's basically saying, no, I don't want equality from men. I want to replace men. That's kind of what it has become. And I think men are finally saying, you know what? No, like, I'm pushing back. We don't have to live in a world where I'm afraid to trigger women, and so therefore I will just say meek and silent in a way that's emasculating. And so I think what we have seen is a rise of masculinity, and then a desire to actually defend it, preserve it. And I think that is inviting greater femininity in women. I think this is just so exciting because, men and women complement each other. And because of the last 100 years, we've lost this great gift of complementarity. And how, if you think about the nature of men and women, there is there's a generative state that only can happen with men and women. If you're a woman alone, you can't actually generate life. So the generation of life is rooted in actually the complementarity of both men and women. And I think that's a profound way to look at it, that civilization would cease to exist if we lose sight that half of what's needed to reproduce is a man, half is a woman. I mean, that's a powerful. So in that level of to be so generative, how much could that be in just the way we complement each other when we work in our home, when we work in our community, when we work in our businesses, with men and women working together, not usurping each other, not confused, but rather in their genius, both feminine and masculine, and really entering into that level of strength that is unique to women and unique to men. I mean, we will have an explosion in our society of life, but also of goodness. Okay, and then number 7, what we are learning is that there needs to be a massive revolution in our health industry. I think what's been coming out because of RFK, who has worked for decades, I want to say 2-3 decades, in fighting the behemoth pharmaceutical company, the vaccine industry, and his stance on, childhood health has, I think, awakened America. And I think we're just beginning to see the massive corruption that was hidden from us, both from the media, both from our social media, and the idea that there's lack of transparency, and there's a revolving door between, the FDA and the pharmaceutical company, and also the our health industry, and so NIH. I mean, it's just the collusion is quite alarming, and you think, really, January? Like, you can do your own homework. I've done my own homework, and it's worse than I even thought. But what I'm seeing is that we can't continue to flourish and be great as a nation if we are physically unwell. And I believe that there is a sinister agenda that's actually causing us to be unhealthy, that we used to be number one in education in the world, and now we're in the 40th education in the world. It used to be that we were, and when I say education, because in order to learn something, you have to be physically healthy. You can't focus if your body is just sugar coated with preservatives and sugar. What we're seeing is that the people that are approving our food is part of the problem. So what we are really seeing is a multi-billion dollar collusion between the government, the health industry, right and left. It's just a whole lot of dishonest party. And so what we need to do is actually stand up for our overall health. That is something that we can unite together as a country, as a world, to say, you know what? Why are the ingredients allowed here that are not even allowed in third world countries? Why is it that Harvard and all the Ivy Leagues, why are the professors being paid by the pharmaceutical company? For why? What's happening? What is happening in even our peer review? You know, who's signing off those papers? I mean, really, it just goes back to the lack of character formation, not just for leadership, but for everyone. Number 8 is, I think there is a rise towards femininity. I think what we are seeing is, you know, men in our bathroom defending womanhood. I think there are men in our sports, and I think what we're seeing is saying, you know what, I really don't agree with women undefined. I actually think that women should be preserved and protected, even though some women might believe in, you know, being pro-choice, or, which is another discussion in itself. I really do think that women are not going to stand for it. And I think what we are seeing is actually the silence of the radical feminists who defended women's rights, but somehow couldn't defend it when it came to sports, couldn't defend it when it came to our children's bathroom, couldn't defend it against pornography, couldn't defend it when it came to women being in pornography. You know, there's just a hypocrisy behind it. And so what I think is happening is that the last 150 years, you've got this, you know, time in history where women did not have a choice and have a voice. They couldn't speak up. They weren't allowed to own properties, couldn't vote. And then all of a sudden, this radical extreme of, I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, with whomever I want. I can choose. I can be a man today and can be a man tomorrow, and I don't need a man. And boy, men are all pigs. I mean, it's just this two radical extremes. And I think what we're seeing is the median. It's you know what, two radical extremes allow us to see, okay, what is it that's actually going to allow us to live sustainably? And I think what we have is freedom in context of responsibility. That's the new kind of woman that we teach in the women's school, is how do you live that? We can know that and say, okay, freedom, responsibility, Jane, what does that look like in terms of hundreds and hundreds of skill set? What does it look like in conversation? What does that look like in marriage and friendship and family life? And so what we are seeing is actually a new hunger for authentic womanhood and reclaiming the dignity of woman, which obviously is my topic that I am so passionate about. This is what I live for. This is what I am made, you know, by God for, is to teach women. And I really think that our school is made for such a time as this, because there's a lot of empowerment, not a lot of actually hardcore equipping women with real skills that leads to greater discipline, character formation, integrity, and just tools to live a life that's fully alive. Number 7 or 8? Number 9 is, I think we need to do a awareness on the mass psychosis that's happening in our culture. How did we get millions and millions and hundreds of millions of people to actually do the thing that maybe are not best for them? Let's just say there's 72 vaccines that children need to have. And there is so much information right now of the connection of not just allergies and autism with the excess vaccine that, by the way, I just learned is not tested. So I was just studying RFK, and he said his stance on vaccine is that he's not against vaccine, he's against not testing the vaccines, because when we don't test, we don't know the repercussions years and years and years. And so I take the same stand, and I think, how did we get people to do that? And who's paying the experts teachers. This is where you start to see and connect the dots. Okay, so I go to the doctor's office. They think, these are good doctors, and they went to school, which, by the way, nutrition, in school is optional. We saw that in the 60s, the Rockefeller kind of slowly, we had natural health hospitals that slowly was being replaced by just pharmaceutical industry. They were actually austed out, and we see almost the history of replacing this natural remedy of healing people with synthetic things. And sure enough, the decline of our health is only growing. We are one of the unhealthiest countries in the world. Obesity is an all-time high, diabetes and cancer. And so what I think is we need to reflect on is, how did we get here? How did the psychosis, how did we allow the mass to think that this was okay, that forced vaccine was okay, that everyone had a mask was okay, and that we shouldn't have nutrition class in our health industry, that the pharmaceutical company actually pays the professors, the doctors, those that our experts learn from. And so what we think we need to do is sort of kind of shake ourselves up, which I think is happening throughout the world, and say, am I too overwhelmed? Am I too comfortable? What's in my life right now that I am distracted, that I'm not seeing what's really happening? What's causing me to not want to seek the truth? Because it's really not hard to see. If you're open, you start to kind of see it. And I find sometimes when I have these conversations online, it doesn't matter what you say or evidence you give them. If someone's mind is made up that it's not true, then nothing will convince them. So I think what we need to analyze is the openness that we have, whether it's vaccine, whether it's Trump, because no one's perfect, whether it's our government industries, and say, is there a part of me that was blinded toward truth, and why did I believe certain things? And I think we can do that collectively, and that's how we look at our government and say, you work for us, we don't work for you. Because if we have a media, if we have our major networks that are basically promoting the propaganda, health is good, the pharmaceutical company is paying the media company, and by the way, they're all for sale right now. Apparently CNN's for sale, MSNBC, and nobody seems to want to buy it except for Elon Musk. That tells you that all those propaganda did not work for some people because they chose to actually have an honest conversation with themselves, whether it's, Elon Musk, who was a lifelong Democrat, but there are still people that did. What is it in our life that's causing that block for us to actually see the truth? All right, and last is, I think Christians need to be in the forefront of every institution. What I mean by that, there is this conversation that we should not mix politics with our faith. The separation of church and faith was not so that the church doesn't enter the political spheres, actually, so the political world does not actually get infiltrated in the church. It's actually the other way around. And so what we need to analyze is to think, if the good men and women who have a moral compass, who believe in biblical principles that's rooted in this country, and who pray, who want to do what is noble and right, say to ourselves, I don't want to get in politics. I don't think we should mix politics. I don't want to put my faith in then who is actually in the driver's seat? Who's making the calls for the laws of our country? How did we pass, pro-abortion? How did we pass forcing vaccines in our children? How did we pass all these laws that are in conflict with our moral compass? It's because we have been conditioned to believe that we cannot mix our faith with politics, with culture, that we should try to walk away from culture as opposed to be in the world but not of the world. And that's a harder life, to be in the world but not of the world, because you actually have to fight the battles of the daily temptations of life. You have to be strong. This is why we need to train every single day. We need to be resilient. We need to manage our mind, our emotions. We need to develop skill after skill so that we don't become a victim to the being manipulated by a culture that's become so godless. But we can't also run away from it simply because we're undertrained. We have to be in the arena of our culture, because if not you, then who? Who's going to fight the battles? How are we going to infuse and enculturate Christ into the culture if we're so afraid to be part of the conversation, the institutions, and become that woman that's a light in the world and becomes Christ in those institutions? We need to be bringing our values in all our institutions, whether it's the government, politics, Hollywood. We have to stand our ground. Look at Hollywood. Mel Gibson, who professes his faith quite vocally, whether you like him or not, I don't know every parts of him, but I see good in all men, at least most men. He's ostracized. Why? Because he's professing his faith. And why is it that all the celebrities, are promoting a lot of things that are just in conflict with our moral virtue, whether it's immodesty or outright satanic rituals like Taylor Swift? Like, we can't just pretend that that's okay. We can't just say, well, I'm a Christian, but I'm just going to kind of like sugarcoat what I like. We can't sugarcoat all the things that we're seeing right now. We have to actually be the salt of the earth in our culture and not be afraid. Be not afraid, like the Bible says, and go in there with skills. Go in there knowing what your goals are. Go in there with a level of humility, but also fierceness, that you're here to lead the way. Learn to listen, learn to actually win people over. We need to become better salespeople, because we can't sell Jesus, we can't sell the truth, we can't sell good government, we can't sell patriotism by being a sleazy car salesperson. We need skills. And this is ultimately the last thing, is that in order for us to restore the moral compass in our culture, women need to become students of themselves. We need to grow our skill set. We need to grow our mindset. We need to have hundreds of skills. That's what we teach in the women's school, whether it's resilience skills, mind management, emotional command, boundaries, routine, how to talk, to people with conflicting belief, how to manage critics. We teach hundreds of skills and scripts in the women's school. At the end of the day, that's where the rubber hits the road. We just don't know how. We can see a vision of a healthier America where a moral compass will become once again the moral fiber of our culture. But at the end of the day, it requires you and me and every person, every woman around you, to actually be a student. And that's the vision that we have in the women's school. Imagine if there was a school in womanhood where we're not afraid to learn cooking, but also learning how to speak when you're on stage. Also business skills, or if you want to be a doctor, really learn how to have a meaningful conversation, but also know how to manage your kitchen and clean it in a very efficient, effective way. We need to integrate the whole woman, and that whole woman then becomes the salt of the earth. We have to do our part to refuel, to study, and so that we can actually become a voice of contribution. So that's our vision here in the women's school, is we want to be the household brand where you learn how to be a woman, because there's no place right now to learn these skills. You can't get them anywhere, because what we teach is a very comprehensive model of what it means to be a woman for such a time as this. And I really think that that's how we heal culture, is that we become students. We learn. It's not motivation, it's discipline, it's character formation, and it's day-to-day living our ordinary lives in an extraordinary way, because we are working on mastering ourselves for the sake of giving more of ourselves. And so if this interests you and you think, okay, Jen, you're gonna sign me up, I really believe in this, and I want to learn to be part of the women's school, join our movement. It is a movement of reclaiming womanhood. Join our schools, join our training, and we will give you the most comprehensive blueprint that you will need to actually heal your generations. And I've told our students here over and over again, and I've told them that this is really about rebuilding our culture, and our testimonies of families after families of generational healing that have been to therapy for years, but came here and say, I just needed tools, January. That's why I was on antidepressant. That's why my husband was in pornography. That's why my kids were anxious and stressed. We just needed tools. And so we offer you practical tools. So join us, join this movement. If you want to learn about the Women's School, join our free community and learn more about the New Woman Masterclass, Woman for Such a Time as This. Thank you all. Till our next podcast. If you like this practical life training and the Women's School, click subscribe so you can get access to more of our practical life training. Also, comment below and let us know what you think so we can hear from you. Don't forget to like this video and share it, because our vision here in the Women's School is to give you practical life training to help you become who you were created to be for such a time as this.